Hello everyone, this is your friendly video for science math for March 18th, Wednesday. We are going to be reading pages 188 through 191. Now, when I say read, we read, obviously that's the royal we. You will be reading these pages on your own. I want to talk a little bit about what you're going to be reading. You're going to be talking about relationships that animals have with each other and plants to help them survive. Yesterday we talked about the idea that all living things need four things, right? Food, water, protection from consumers, and shelter. And so God gave animals and plants adaptations, abilities to be able to live. And part of that is the relationships they have with other animals or with plants to survive. There are different kinds of relationships you're going to read about. All these relationships fall under the category of what we call symbiosis. I'm going to say that again. Symbiosis. Your book describes symbiosis as a relationship when two species interact with each other over a long period of time. Now, interact can be anything. That can be a good thing. That can be a bad thing. That can be a meh thing. Okay, so there's three types. One is kind of the one person suffers. Or one animal suffers. It's the parasitism. So a parasite is something that sucks the lifeblood or the energy from another, from something else, and that's called the host. So you have the parasite living on whatever it lives on, and then the host them, even though they may not want to, and is that parasite is getting what it needs to live. So I'm going to read to you about one of these, an example. Okay, this is called the tarantula hawk. Now, I'm not actually talking about a hawk. This is not even a hawk. It's a wasp. Okay, again, this is kind of the cartoony pictures I showed you yesterday. This is an egg-bearing female wasp that has to have a tarantula to lay its egg on its back. It thinks of the tarantula as a warm nursery. So it has a smell. It has a keen smell. So that's its adaptation. God gave it a good smell so that it can locate the spider's burrow. And then when it enters the burrow, it pokes at the tarantula with its antenna until it rears up in a fighting position. So it pokes at him, pesters him, okay, until he rears up ready to fight. And when they wrestle, she wrestles until she can sting its underside. She doesn't want to kill it, okay? But she kind of, it says, it paralyzes the hairy beast, so talking about the tarantula, and then I probe the tarantula's open sting area and sip a spider shake. Ugh. Okay, but that's showing that she's a parasite from the fluids oozing there. After the snack, I drag the hairy beast body back inside its burrow and I lay a single egg on its back. My egg eventually hatches into a baby grub and feeds off of the tarantula's body. Okay, so that's an example of a parasite. But that's the way, isn't that interesting how God created that? That female wasp knows exactly where she needs to lay her eggs. And then that's the relationship that they have. Okay, so that's the parasite relationship. The other type is called mutualism, and we see these a lot too. You see these a lot in nature. And you see in your book there, you see the oxpecker, which is a type of bird that pecks the insects off the gazelle, and that helps the gazelle, but it also gives the bird food. Bees and flowers are an example. Cleaner shrimp, you've probably seen those, and they clean parasites off, and that's their food, but it also helps the one that they're cleaning it off of. And so there's lots of these mutualism, and this is what I would pray our relationships would be with each other. that our relationships are mutual. Mutual meaning both sides. You give a little, the other person gives a little. It's not like a parasite where you're just constantly taking from somebody else. You want your relationships to be mutual, where you see a benefit from someone else's friendship and you are benefiting them. And so we see that a lot in nature, though. And I think we see that a lot because that's the way God wants us to be. That's the way He has designed our relationships to be. Each of us helping each other in a different way. This is an interesting one. This is called the Calvaria tree. And it depended on the dodos. Now we know that dodos are extinct now. It was a bird and it's extinct. But the dodos lived on this island where this tree grew, and it had such a hard outer shell to its seed that it needed the dodo to break the shell apart and then move it around where it was ever eating, and then it would sprout. But without an animal has to have a special stomach called a gizzard that kind of breaks down that hard to digest seed. And without those birds there, the trees were dying out. So scientists came and they started trying to figure out why this tree was not growing. And they figured out that its seeds were not being carried around and planted in other places because of the lack of the dodos. The birds were gone. So they tried to introduce wild turkeys, and that has been helping some. And they hope that again that this island will be filled with these trees again. So I thought that was kind of cool. So that's mutualism. The dodos ate it for food, but the tree actually needed the dodos to take their seeds so that it could be planted. Here's another one. This is another type of tree. Cecropia tree. There we go. Cecropia tree. It says this one is in South America, and it's nicknamed the ant tree because its branches and trunk are hollow, and inside the tree it's divided into all these different chambers, like hallways, where all the ants can go up in. I think that's kind of cool. And it has a special oil and a sugary substance on its leaf hairs and at the base of the leaf, and that nourishes a specific type of ant, the Azteca ant. So the Azteca ants arrive and they move in, their queen sets up a nest and everything, and they get busy, and they take from the tree what they need, but they protect the tree from insects and rainforest vines. So the strangler fig would love to wrap its vines around that tree, but it won't with the ants there. And another relationship that this tree depends on is other animals like birds and rodents and other creatures that eat their fruit. They digest the seeds and then replant them naturally when they leave waste in the forest, which is what we were talking about with the other tree. And that process starts the tree all over again. That's how it gets planted. So the trees and plants depend on these animals to eat them, and then through their waste, those seeds are planted again. So that's another example of mutualism. I think I had one more here I wanted to. Yes, everybody loves the sloth, right? So we have a two-toed sloth, and this one is in the tropical forest of Central America. And this says its hairs are grooved, and that allows algae to grow in the grooves and forms a slimy layer on its fur. Now, you would think that would be gross and that would be bad, but think about a sloth who's living up in the trees most of the time. Why would he want a layer of algae on his fur? Helps him blend in, doesn't it? Makes him the color of the trees, so it protects him. And his hair gives the algae a place to get closer to the sunlight. So as the sloth can move up, that algae, remember we talked about the rainforest having canopies and the lower levels not getting much light? So as that sloth goes up, he's carrying that algae with him, and the algae can grow because it's on the back of a sloth. That's kind of cool. So see, they're both, that's called mutualism. That's helping each other. Okay, I think that's cool. So then the last type, so we already have the two, the parasite, the mutualism, and then commensalism. Commensalism is one benefits and the other one is not harmed or is not benefited. So it's called a one-sided relationship. The one side is benefited, but the other one, it's not bothering him, but it's also not helping him. And they show that here in your book about the with the orchids attaching to the trees so that they can get closer to the sunlight. It's not hurting the trees, but it's helping the orchid. So one-sided. All right, and then 190 and 191, you're going to read about behaviors. Two main types of behaviors. Instincts, which are behaviors that creatures are born knowing. They don't have to be taught. And we see most things with animals, like all of this that I read. Those ants, do they have to be taught to go to that type of tree? No, that's an instinct. Does that wasp have to be taught to fight the tarantula? No, that's an instinct. She knows how to do that. Okay? So a lot of behaviors that these animals have so that they can survive is an instinct. No one has to, your book says, no one has to teach a groundhog how to hibernate. Okay? No one has to give hummingbirds travel directions. They know and that shows God's care, right? That's instincts. Instincts are God's care for his creation to give them what they need. Some behaviors, though, are learned. Most of what you do is learned. Your body doesn't have to be taught to digest and all of that. You don't actually have to be taught to eat. You want to eat, and your parents kind of help you, give you the spoon, but your body knows it's an instinct that it needs to eat. But what's learned is reading an instinct? No, that's called a learned behavior. What about walking? Think about babies. Is walking an instinct? They have to be taught, don't they? Oh, come on, honey, you can do it. Come here, come here. And then they fall and they get up and they fall and they get up. It's a learned behavior. We can teach animals learned behaviors, can't we? Your dog, teaching your dog to play dead or to shake, those are learned behaviors. Seals that perform tricks, all of that, those are all learned behaviors. So you're going to see the Bible or the book lists several of those. I have an interesting question for you. Thinking about learned behaviors and instincts makes me think about sin. Is sin a learned behavior or is it an instinct? And it may have a category all of its own. I don't know if we can necessarily call it an instinct, but do you have to teach a little kid to be selfish? Think about it. You've known little 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. Do you have to teach them, honey, it's all about you. I want you to cry when you don't get your way? No, that's what they automatically do. That's sin. That's sin. Do you have to teach a little kid to lie when they've gotten caught doing something they shouldn't do? No, they instantly do it because they want to protect themselves. That's sin. That's sin. It is I would call it something a little bit different maybe. Let's call an inherited trait from Adam and Eve. From the moment you're born, your hearts are black. No one has to teach you to sin. You know it. You are a sinner. But God, out of his graciousness, has reached out to us, right? And he offers his son to us. And through Jesus, we can actually know what it's like to please God when we wouldn't otherwise. We would only have that inherited behavior of sin. So that's interesting to think about, because if you're thinking about all the things we do and you're trying to label them and put them into categories, sin is right there, right? That covers most of the things that we do, right? Okay, now to review these pages that you should have read, I want you to do the activity manual, which is the study guide this time. So the study guide, page 128, and then it's on the back of the hummingbird page. So get your hummingbird page back and do the back of that, okay? And then the next page is page 129, and it's more long answers, okay? But all the answers are there. They're right there in these pages. You may, because this is a study guide, you may need to back up. This also talks about, this one talks about the adaptations a little bit. So you're going to have to back up a little bit to get some of that information, but complete those. Also, don't forget to do your quick check. Write the questions out, write the answer. Write the question, write the answer. Complete sentences. Keep practicing that. Please, please, please. Every sentence should have a subject. Every sentence should have a verb. Every sentence should have a capital letter and a period, right? You're doing your work well. You're pushing yourselves and working hard. I appreciate that. Now, in the comment section of this video, I want you to I'm going to leave it kind of open-ended. You can either list an animal and an instinct that an animal has. Okay, so you can pick any animal. You can research, you can look up anything, pick any animal and an instinct that that animal has. Or you can talk about humans and say, give me a learned behavior of a human. Okay, one learned behavior of a human or an instinct of an animal. Think about that and put that in the comments. As you're putting comment, please look ahead at the other comments and make sure you're not repeating. Think of something original. I'm proud of you all for the work that you're doing. Have a great day.